with recreational cannabis now legal in California, San Diego employment attorney Ward Heinrichs is back on Big Blend Radio Success Express show today to share legal insight for employers and employees. I don't know if you should be smoking a doobie instead of having a martini lunch. I don't know. I don't think you should be doing martini lunches either, but sometimes they're fun. But anyway, Ward is a regular Big Blend Radio guest and contributor to a Big Blend Radio and TV magazine. You can read his articles and listen to his interviews. Just go to blendradioandtv.com, but also go to his website, especially if you're in San Diego, bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at Ward Heinrichs, and just type in Ward Heinrichs and you'll get him on Facebook as well. Hey, Ward, how's it going?
I'm doing very well. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good. I want to know, is like Californian giggles now, like permanent giggle land, or like, you know, the office buildings have a different smell? What's going on?
We just can't stop laughing now. Woohoo!
I know.
Well, yeah, it's, you know what? Yeah, no. Recreational marijuana is now legal in California. But that doesn't necessarily change the rules at work. So not everyone's giggling.
Yeah.
But maybe some people are. I don't know.
Well, how does that work? Like, if somebody goes and has a martini for lunch and goes back to work, they don't get fired unless they get drunk. Then they might.
Or it depends on your job.
So if you go to lunch and you smoke a bit and come back, I mean, you're not really in the workplace. You're not actually working when you do it. You just, I don't know, do the effects wear off quicker?
Yeah, wow, those are good questions. I mean, yeah, the two martini lunch used to be, fairly standard back, I guess, in the 50s and 60s, before I started working, because when I started working, we weren't doing two martini lunches. I barely have a beer every once in a while at lunch, so that's just not the norm anymore.
Yeah.
It used to be a big deal.
And
now it's wheatgrass.
What's that?
And now it's wheatgrass in your smoothies.
Yeah, wheatgrass, right. Go to the gym, drink some wheatgrass, and that's your lunch.
Yeah, okay.
But, yeah, no, actually, coming back to work intoxicated, whether it's from marijuana or alcohol, could get you in trouble. Now, it's going to depend on the employer's policies. Maybe there are employers out there who don't have a drug policy, and I'm sure there are. Maybe there are employers who don't have an alcohol policy. So then there's no clear guidance as to how that would be handled. But if they do have a policy and it says, hey, you can't be drunk, and, what is drunk? So there's going to be some gray area there. You can't be high. What is high? There's some gray area in there. And if we catch you that way, you've violated the policy and we can terminate you.
Okay, so what about when back in the day when I worked for someone, they made me do drug tests, so I had to do the little pee-pee test and all that, and so I know that was like part of the insurance deal for them, and so there would be and I lived in Florida and weed was around, man. It's like, I don't know why, but as we're talking, I can smell some, but I don't know why. I can smell it literally.
It's a flashback.
I know. I had a boss who had flashbacks all the time. But anyway, he was really fun to work with. He did. You've been with him too, driving in the car and see police lights and he starts tripping out, but that was acid. He had acid flashbacks. But
remember one time he said, is this a yellow piece of paper or a pink? And I would look at him like, Bob.
Dude, he really did do Woodstock.
He was that boy.
It was fun. But going back to that, so like if a company says, okay, you need to be able to pee in a cup every month if that's what happens. Is that what you're saying with drug policies too, that you have to be clean at home even though, recreational is okay? Like, what happens in that world?
Yeah, there are limited circumstances in which they can test for, make you do a urinalysis test. If there is cause to believe that there is a violation, then yes, you can do a urinalysis test. If they're pre-screening, you can do one. After employment, it's much more limited when you can do drug tests, but you can do random tests. You got to give warning. You know, there's some circumstance in which you can do them. But the bottom line is, whatever circumstance that you legally fall into, and you're required to do a urinalysis legally, if the drug policy is, hey, we don't tolerate marijuana at all, then you can be terminated or not hired.
Mm.
And those policies have been, and there's case law about that too. There, when we had the medical marijuana law passed, it was in place for a while before this case came out, and someone challenged it, and they said, "Hey, look, you know, we're allowed to do that. This is legal, but my employer wants to not hire me, or my future employer wants to not hire me. I don't think this is right." And the Supreme Court said, "No, the employers are allowed to have alcohol and drug-free workplaces." And drug-free meant if you do not pass the urinalysis test, you can be terminated or not hired.
Wow. Now, what happens if a dispensary does that and says, "Look, you can work here, but you can't taste the product"?
Well,
that's
sure, that's like being a bartender and drinking.
Yeah, that's true. You're not allowed to drink on the job, right?
Right.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
I was going to say you're not supposed to drink in a bar. Like if you're working in a bar, you're not allowed to drink in the bar while you're on duty, maybe. Some say no. And then, but if you were running a dispensary, or you're the manager of the dispensary, or you work there, could a dispensary say you can't taste the product or smoke the product? You can just sell it, and but you're not allowed to get it in your system. They could be drug free.
Yeah, and in fact, I think there is a law. This law is really long, and I haven't read all of it. And I think that I read somewhere where it said that they're not allowed to use while working. So it's actually, I think it's illegal under the California recreational use law.
Wow.
But assuming that, let's say that maybe I'm wrong on that, because I didn't read that in the text, and the text is huge. It sprawls all over the place. If an employer has, again, it's the employer's policy that really counts here. If the employer says, "Oh, marijuana is okay on in the workplace that I own and run," well, then it is. You won't violate a recreational law. Now, the problem is you could violate. Well, you certainly would be violating the federal law. And that's one reason why the statute's written the way it is. They don't want employers to violate federal law. They don't want California law forcing employers to violate the federal law. So, but the policy could be, I don't have a problem with it. And in fact, I've seen places where it doesn't seem like it's much of a problem. I'm sure there's no official policy that says, "Yeah, please light up," but maybe it happens. And so in that case, you're not going to get terminated because the employer's not going to exercise that right.
So it really just depends on the employer's choice whether they want to be federally safe or whatever. Then it depends on the kind of company too.
Kind of work.
Yeah. But I was reading too, like with this, you just because you can grow weed now doesn't mean that if you're renting that your landlord's going to be cool with you growing weed or even smoking it on the property. I mean, there's property owners have a right of whether or not you are allowed to smoke on the property. It's not that you can't just cross over into California and start working somewhere and light up. It's just not going to happen. It sounds like it. Everybody hears recreational, marijuana, and it's like, yippee-yi-yay, but there's laws, on, being intoxicated, period.
In public or,
Yeah. Well, under the recreational use law, you're not allowed to do it in a public place. It has to be a private place.
So you can't go
fun.
sit in the park and
people watch.
Right. Yes.
Oh, so you just
you're not. Well, I mean, you are allowed to drink in public to some degree, but there's all those. You can't just walk down. You're not supposed to walk down the sidewalk with a highball in your hand.
Right. So here's the deal. That's a bad one. Now here's the deal. I found out that you're not allowed to walk on the beach in Oceanside with a cocktail in your hand because I was walking from friend's house to friend's house. It was 4th of July, and a cop came after me on a horse, and I started talking to the horse. He's like, "Ma'am." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'm in a different country. Sorry." I learned. But So like if you're not allowed to smoke, I would drink. You can. They have beer gardens. Like if you go to a festival, and I know you know about beer gardens ward with like
right.
Oktoberfest. No
I
matter
love
if
Oktoberfest.
they have like designated areas for beer and
Yeah.
the beer garden. So even if it's a festival, that means you still can't light up legally. You know, so unless in one day they say there's a weed garden that's allowed.
Like
I mean,
a weed festival.
yeah, that's going to be different.
Well, yeah, and part of it's enforcement though too. Let's say there was a weed festival, and so everyone went out in the desert and they, popped up some tents and started playing music and invited bands in, and it's known as a weed festival. Now, is anyone there going to care? Well, probably not. So even if it's in public and maybe not technically legal, a lot of things don't get enforced. And that's the way it's always been. I mean, before the recreational use law, things like that happen they happened, put it that way.
They do happen.
Just go to a Grateful Dead concert,
Yeah, exactly.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
It's like how many people can be arrested at one time?
Yeah, so I mean, festival organizers hiring people may be a little different. There's, this is going to be so interesting to watch because I bet you more things happen. So, I mean, the whole thing is against federal because isn't Jeff Sessions trying to stop this thing like all the way, like stop states in some way?
Well, all right. The last thing I read on that was he said that the local assistant U.S. attorneys could enforce the federal law, the way they see fit. So in California, I'm assuming the local assistant attorney won't change their policy. They're not trying to enforce, there's some marijuana busts on a federal level, but it's not like they're really trying to fine people and get them in trouble. They're not looking to find recreational users who are legal in California but not legal in under the federal law. So the way it sounded, it didn't sound like it was going to change much. Okay. But Jeff Sessions did say that we will enforce marijuana laws. He did say that, but then he kind of backed off a little bit.
Yeah, because I don't even want to get started, on that. But the reality in your article, and everyone, Ward's got an article on weed. I love saying that. Sorry. It's
weed
up
in the
on
workplace.
Blend Radio. Yeah, I know, it's fun. It's up on BlendRadioandTV.com and will be in the March and April issue of Big Blend Radio and TV magazine, which is prime season for growing. Just saying, but anyway, it's spring.
Well, you're allowed to have six plants. You're allowed to have six plants in California.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
You can grow 6
plants.
Wow, that's. I mean, I don't understand the whole thing on growing and harvesting, but I had friends once who did that legally, actually, and for medicinal marijuana, and it's fascinating. It's pretty fascinating. But in the article, you talk about going back to the drug-free workplace. I just want to make sure I got this straight in my head. If say Jeff Sessions maybe smoked a doobie and got happy about it and said, okay, it's not a substance one anymore, it's like or controlled substance, this is fine. Companies can turn around, like if the federal government didn't care at all about weed anymore, and maybe had to watch it that people weren't driving into each other at a very slow bumper car rate, companies could still turn around and say, no, we want it to be drug-free. Even if it's not, it doesn't matter what the federal government says on that level.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the way I'm interpreting it is even if the federal law changes and marijuana is not a Schedule I controlled substance anymore, let's assume marijuana is actually legal. It's not a controlled substance. The way the law is worded, it sounds like employers still could have policies prohibiting marijuana. I mean, the use at all. So, because they use the word or the term prospective employees, so that's got to be testing, right? I assume.
Yeah.
And that means they could test prospective employees and say, hey, we're not going to hire you because you violated our marijuana policy, even though it's legal across the country. So I think that's allowed, but that may have to be litigated. I'm not absolutely sure about that.
I've known Matt. He got tested and before he worked at San Onofre, he got tested, and you have that 30-day trial thing when you work for a company, and I remember that's the first time that I had to do a PP test or whatever you called them, the thing in a cup, and I was like horrified. I was like, what do you mean? That's like, I thought that was just a violation of privacy as far as,
Well, they didn't watch you.
I know. I've just, I was like, okay. But anyway, I had to do it in the 30-day thing. And the same thing for Matt. He had to be clean before they would even. It was part of like the second part of your interview was you had to have no pot in your system. And it's an interesting thing because if you're going for a job, you better be clean because it takes a month to get it out of your system, depending on your body and who you are and stuff like that.
Yeah. All right.
Whereas cocaine, it's 72 hours. It's like boom, so everybody can walk around on coke. But
okay, but
you can't. You're going to get busted if you smoke because you're going to be slower. I don't.
Well, I'll defer to your experience, Lisa.
I don't do either. But well, I've had my moments in life.
What about the idea that so if the federal government said they don't care, which I don't think they ever will, but if they go, okay, we don't care, we'll leave it up to the states.
Eventually they will. It's changing. It's going to change. I think eventually. I mean, it may take 50 or 100 years, but I think it will.
Yeah, okay. If the employer doesn't care and the federal government doesn't care, what about the thing here? Like, I mean, for when I was working, people could smoke, not marijuana, but cigarettes in the break room.
Well,
and then finally that changed. So even just from the idea of the smoke, if everybody went into the break room
contact
and
that.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be giggling my whatever off without even smoking it. Not that I know anything about that.
Well, yeah, and here's why I think that employers, even if the feds say it's okay, I think employers will still have the right to control their workplace and prohibit both alcohol and marijuana. So I don't think you'll, unless an employer wants it, people lighting up, then I don't think that the government will rob them of their ability to control their workplace that way. They'll just say, no, you can still prohibit it if you want to. Now, I think the bigger question is, well, what about, it's legal everywhere, federal, state, and can you still test for it? It's one thing to be high at work. It's another thing to do it after work and then come in and get tested, and you're not affected.
Yeah.
So that's where I think it might change.
That's great.
Yeah, that's where I think, because even for the medical marijuana side of things, that what you were talking about that too in your article, and now it's like, if someone really does need it medicinally, some people, I mean, it's in their house, with their kids because of seizures, and there's so many different reasons. And some manage just to get it because they have a good doctor that just has a really good prescription pad. But there's people that really do need it, and it's sad if they're doing it at home. They're not coming to work, happy and giggly. That's two different things. It's the same thing. You can go home and have a cocktail and go to work the next day if you're
even
not overdoing it. But
right.
And so you're not getting tested. But I mean, you can smell it when people are like that. But well, you can smell weed too, but there's that thing where people should be allowed to have their choice. What I wanted to ask you is, I know we talked about harassment in the workplace last time, in hospitality and in the food industry and stuff like that, and you were talking about training has to happen on all levels. Like you were saying, like, don't just wait for a law to tell you to do it. Do everything you can, and put the posters up and all that. With this changeover, do you think the same thing has to happen in the workplace, that the employer needs to and the management needs to talk to the employees and say where they are on this, so that everybody knows and doesn't have a workroom sneak out for a fun lunch?
Yeah, no, I do. And and I think that there could be a lot of misconception on part of employees because recreational use, it's legal, we can do what we want. Well, the law really allows employers to do what they want, and if they really have a strict marijuana policy or anti-drug policy, then they're allowed to, and they may get a bad surprise. So as an employer, you don't want to be surprising your employees. You want your employees to understand the rules as best, because you hired them for a reason. You hired them to do whatever job you hired them for. So you don't want to get rid of them. I mean, you know, that's the assumption.
Yeah.
So you need to tell them, hey, we still have a very strict marijuana policy here, and if they do, and we're going to enforce it. Just because you can do it after work doesn't mean anything.
See, there goes the brownies. No more brownies in the break room.
Well, and like I said, there once you're hired, there are limited times in which they could actually test for it. There's only limited circumstances. But pre-hiring, that's really where you have carte blanche to do that kind of stuff. But still, even then, they need to know what the policy is and make the wisest choices to keep their jobs, if they want to keep their job.
Now, has it changed at all? I know before we've talked on California law could be different, like on minimum wage. San Diego City is going to be different than San Diego County, like the mountains of Julian is going to be different than, San Diego City on minimum wage law. Now, is it the same with this, or is California across the board is this way, or have different areas said yes to growing and smoking? I mean, has that changed with the laws according to city?
Yes, what different cities, municipalities, and other types of governmental entities inside California can do is restrict how it's dispensed and transported. They can't say you can't grow your own 6 plants. Now, there's limitations on where you can do it and how you can do it and things like that. That's already in the law. But they can say, we don't want dispensaries. And there are cities, I'm just trying to remember which ones. I think there's a couple in San Diego County that have denied the right to have dispensaries. And San Diego City has just recently passed an ordinance that allows for it, but it's super restricted. And so the local governments are allowed to restrict dispensaries.
Wow. Okay. So, because I know some of the communities that we represent with on the tourism side, they have one chamber of commerce. I mean, all the chambers of commerce we know and work with. There's like town hall meetings on to light up or not, and it has really been interesting for them. Let's put it this way: sitting in those meetings, and there's been some heat, literally between people that
are
pro and against. It's been really quite a hot topic. It really has to see what's who's allowing what and where, and some people are very scared of it. And then I wonder too, if it was allowed and somebody goes and works at a dispensary, how that works if once they move on to a different career and that's part of your resume. You've been working in a dispensary for 2 years. If there's going to be some prejudice to that person that worked in the dispensary.
Not if you're not allowed.
Depending on the next place you go, if they think, you're a stoner if you work there, so you don't know anything. You know what I mean? That kind of there's that attitude.
That might be. I'm wondering if people who worked at distilleries just after Prohibition ended, whether they had some of that type of, face some of that type of pressure.
You're going to go to hell, boy.
I don't know. And my guess is the more it's around, the more accepted it's going to be.
Okay.
But there is a difference, I guess, in, the main thing is, I guess what I'm getting at is, the main thing is, you can't go to work drunk, you can't go to work stoned, just don't do that, and you should be pretty good. If you happen to work for a dispensary or people don't hold that against you, well, maybe a little bit nowadays, but, 20 years from now, I doubt it, not much. I don't think that means you're a stoner. I suppose if you're, stoned all the time, that's a problem, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like alcohol.
Well, I think it's your behavior. I mean, because
how you
you would be saying that every bartender is a drunk, and
that's
not
true. Most bartenders I know don't even drink. So they're like we've been there, done that, and barely have a cocktail here and there. Well, not all of them, I should say. But I was going to say. The one thing, too, is transportation. The transportation industry, that's got to be something that definitely employers have to talk to their employees about, because that's, and say, like, rules still apply.
Yeah, absolutely. There are federal laws that I think will never go away. I don't think you drug test drivers in the transportation industry, because you just don't want them. You want to make sure everyone's clean when they're driving. And if you're a professional driver, the standard's higher than if you're a non-commercial driver.
But even just as a regular person, I'm pretty sure that California isn't going to say, go ahead, drive your car while you're stoned. I mean, they wouldn't say that.
Absolutely not. No, that's illegal. Yeah. The big issue with that is police have said, well, it's harder to determine if someone is under the influence of marijuana than it is to determine if they're under the influence of alcohol. You've got some pretty non-subjective tests for alcohol. But they're saying that marijuana, it's not so clear. Someone could have a high level of THC in their system and not appear very stoned, and some can have way less and appear pretty stoned. So I guess they're saying that there's a big difference. And with the blood alcohol, they can say, well, even if you don't seem like you're drunk, if it's 0.08 or more, that's illegal.
Drunk, Well,
and it's hard to do that with marijuana. Maybe they will, but it's harder to do.
If you're the cop, if the car's weaving, they're drunk. And if the car's going real slow and they're not 80 years old, they're stoned.
Yeah, I remember. How I know a little bit about what goes on in that world is being in a band, and you see everything. And I didn't know what meth was or crack or I didn't know any of that until I realized the drummer was that way, and then our guitarist was way out. And I remember catching a ride with the guitarist, and all of a sudden he was going down Interstate I-15, right? It was 25 miles an hour. I'm like, what's going on? Why can't you drive? And it's he's like, and I'm like, oh, dude, no. It's 25 miles an hour all the way back. Not a good thing when it's a band. But anyway, that's a whole other story. So I'm glad we could talk about this, because I see so many things going on, and I know that police are, checking out what's going on out there. And so all I know is I don't know how you get it home, since you're not allowed to transit. How do you get it home? You have to put it in the back of your car. Like if you buy it at a dispensary, you put it in the back of. You got to put it in the car.
I guess it depends how it's regulated. Oh boy, that's a good question.
I think you have to put it in your trunk.
No. For personal use, you can transport it.
Okay.
I'm getting into an area where I'm not really clear on, because I've really only analyzed this in terms of employment. Now we're talking about personal stuff, but I'm really you're allowed to have an ounce or less. You're allowed to possess that. So I think that means you can also put it in your car and transport it.
Smoke it. But you can't smoke it.
You can't smoke it. Yeah, you can't be under the influence.
Yeah.
And you can't do it in a public place. And is that a public place or not? I mean, we can go round and round about that. But so there are limitations on what you can do with it, in public or in a car. But you certainly, I think it's clear that you can transport it. Now, the transportation regulations I was talking about in the article were about dispensaries.
Yeah.
There are big issues in California, in San Diego, about who can actually deliver it. Can the drivers who drove for the medical marijuana dispensaries still drive for the new recreational use dispensaries? And it looks like there's a different application they have to go through to drive for the recreational use dispensaries. So they have to, if just because you drive for a medical, my understanding is just because you drive for a medical marijuana dispensary doesn't mean you could drive for a recreational use dispensary.
Wow, yeah, it's
and
different.
Now you can't even drive for the medical marijuana one, because that new law prevents you from doing either. So you have to have you got to go through a different process to be qualified. And I think you have to actually work for the dispensary.
Wow.
Yeah.
What happens to the dealers?
You mean the black market dealers?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, but what happens to the guy on the corner?
But that's the whole point of this, is to get rid of them.
Yeah, I know.
Them.
Some of them are not happy with it.
Well, yeah, that's one of the points. Now, you know what I heard, though? I just heard something else. There's so many things you hear. You see on TV, or you might read a quick article or something. Yeah. And one of them was, this is going to be unfair to people in lower income stratas because they won't have access to the medical marijuana. They were saying that it's mostly upper level, mid class or above, and so they'll still be, buying dime bags on the corner.
Well, you need to be careful with that. No, we've done a lot of shows on marijuana. Dr. Dina, she was actually the person that the TV show Weeds was crafted after. Her story. She came on our show and she was telling she wanted it to be legalized for one reason. People start getting the cheap stuff, and there's fake weed out there, and that's just wrong. And you could end up getting the wrong kind of weed for your body, and there is an art to this. It's like some people should never drink rum. I'm not saying you, Nancy, but some people should never drink it. They're bad on it, So it's the same thing on weed, that certain people match with the right weed, and especially if it's a medical thing, especially on that. So there is a reason, and I know people don't like some people don't like it because of the taxes. Now there's taxes on it and stuff, but that helps schools. I always thought that was funny. That's
a good
help
thing.
Education. Yeah, it is a good thing, but you never thought,
taking it out of the black market's a good thing. It just makes total
it is
sense.
because there's some bad people out there with some bad weed that makes people really, really sick. So I think this is a positive move, and I find it fascinating.
Well, there's that. There's also the war on drugs that no one's won for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a libertarian. I just go, wow, I see all this money, all these deaths.
Yeah.
Over
and all the people
something that's here anyway.
Prison.
It just didn't make sense to me ever. And it's just like, all right, make it legal and tax it. And to me, that's a good solution.
That's fair. It's fair, and it's going to schools and things like that, which I think, and infrastructure for communities. And this whole thing with weed, where people are getting nailed and put in jail, corporate prisons, to make the corporate prison money, and half the politicians are in bed with that. So, sorry, but that's a whole other thing.
Wow. Yeah. You're really up on that soapbox.
I'm sorry. I get into a whole thing on the corporate prison and the marijuana market is so hand in hand. I think we've done too many interviews on this for the years on it. It is fascinating, but things are moving forward and it's exciting. And thank you for joining us, Ward, and enlightening us with this wonderful conversation on what to do work-wise and with weed. So don't go out in your break room and light up and order a pizza for the office. That's not a thing to do.
Don't do that.
I think someone's going to come up with some concoction of after you smoke a joint, drink this, and you'll pass a test.
Golden seal. Sorry, by the way, you still won't.
You're not supposed to tell.
Sorry, but it takes a long time to get it out. Ward, everybody, go to bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com, and if Golden Seal doesn't work, call Ward. I can see a whole new line of employment law for you now. It's like his website's going to have a whole department dedicated to weed. Golden Seal didn't work, call Ward. But anyway, again, it's bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com. He's on Twitter at Ward Heinrichs and Facebook as well. And keep up with him. He posts all kinds of laws of what's going on in San Diego and California especially. So whether you're an employer or an employee, follow him and watch for his articles in Big Blend Radio and TV magazine and on blendradioandtv.com. Thanks so much for joining us, Ward.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll talk soon. You take care. I got
okay, you too.
Now.
All right. Sounds good.